Dr. Isabella Pasqualini, welcome to the Neuroarchitect.
Hi, Maria. Thank you very much for having me.
You're trained as an architect and later completed a PhD, bridging architecture with cognitive neuroscience. What was the moment you realized you needed both languages to do the work you wanted to do?
Maria, this is very interesting because in recent days I have been preoccupying myself very much with that question. I mean, what's the motivation to get involved in such a technical, I would say, and scientific endeavor, which is still far apart from, the more creative work that an architect does. So there's quite a gap between the two worlds. But at the time when I chose to do so, that seemed the only realistic solution, because I was working on a large competition with colleagues for an urban project in Angola. And basically, we proposed a valid, urban planning and urban design solution for a foreign culture, of course, which was far away and also far from our cultural understanding. So it was kind of challenging, and we desperately tried to find the tools to grasp the problem and to grasp how to develop public space in that culture. So
Which year was
in the
that?
end, that was in 2008. We used, of course, renderings. We used the technical tools, the digital tools that were at hand. But on the one hand, I came to realize that when it comes down to representing the space, for the users, we were still engaged with Renaissance techniques. By that, I mean collaging renderings, to create a more panoramic view. And maybe photographic means and diagrams and calculations. So on the one hand, I understood that the technical means are not there. And on the other hand, one of the problems was the human factor. So that I came to understand that a lot of people wanted to own this image of a project, that was not concrete yet. And that this was not good for the project. It became a destructive factor, that everybody wanted to own the place and wanted to have, everybody had special interests on that. So I came to ask myself, what makes people want to own, I'm just saying a number, 77 square kilometers of dusty land, with nothing on top. That was very abstract to me. And I thought I need to know better why people have these ownership feelings. And that brought me straight into the neuroscience topic, with this body ownership that I had the chance to study with Olaf Blanke at the Federal Institute in Switzerland.
When you meet someone and they ask, so what do you actually do? Especially that you mentioned that you enhance through design the user's multisensory horizon. What's your simplest explanation of your practice today? So let's also understand when
Well,
you started this practice as well.
Yes. I mean, usually I just say I am an architect. I'm a designer, that I care about how spaces are shaped for the user. So from a user-centric perspective. And then people, of course, ask me, but how do I have to imagine, your day-to-day business? And actually I work in research. For now, the projects I'm working on, if it's not research, it's more related to media and virtual reality, to really develop tools for designers and architects. And that was the first point that I mentioned before, because there is a lack actually of good tools for architects and urban designers to conceive social space. And on the other hand, when it comes down to this research practice, to really combining neuroscience and architecture, I say it's about perceiving space, the perception of space. How do humans, perceive their environment and interact with it?
So people who take advantage, let's say, or use your work will be more people in the field. How will they use your findings? What do you tell them? Why it's important? So many people now, many even students are new. They feel that this is new to them. How will you tell them that this is something that architecture needs today?
Yes. Um, I mean, one thing I believe that we still have to understand well is that there is a big change going on in the profession, and digitalization may be a part of it. That AI will change our profession a lot, and this is already happening. And I'm not sure if you remember, because I've been in that field for so many years, the business of renderings, of visualization. I still remember doing it on a very old Mac Performa, and you had to find your own way to generate library elements and then how to deal with Photoshop in the end. And today, actually, it's more like I'm training architects how to build a library, a 3D library, so that they can do this real-time rendering with virtual reality. It has changed completely. And basically, there's this whole branch of visualization in the profession that has been cut out. So today, I think you get less and less work in the field of visualization, because rendering has become so easy, to produce for everybody. And the same thing, I think, will happen, for instance, with drafting, floor plans. You will get, at one mouse click, you will get a whole range of options on how to organize space in 2D, maybe also in 3D, and then from there. So you could ask yourself, well, what is an architect doing then? Because that was the profession we had. And then the construction sector is handled by the industry, by more specialized industrial branches. Then there's a lot of engineering involved. And you might wonder, beyond project management, what is an architect supposed to do? So I think I would start there in wanting to work on an identity of the architect in that field, the person who really has the capacity to handle the intersection between the human and technology, because there will be nobody else between the user, between the person, and between this whole machine that is building so much, producing so many cubic meters of concrete and of built environment. There's nobody else. There's just the architect. And I'd like students to take responsibility there, to be really capable, to really be conscious of what they are doing, and to be creative in that, to interpret it in a creative way. I mean, this is really something that I think is important.
Since you mentioned the fast shift, because I also felt it, suddenly we saw many, software emerge, many ways that are different from the process we experienced. Even we had at some point to still rely on our handwork to feel the project.
Mhm.
And now it's like almost inexistent. Maybe the first year of studies only. So, how did you experience this shift in software use for architecture?
Mhm. I mean, what you say is a loss of scale in architecture. I mean, in architectural terms, we would define it a loss of scale, because scale in architecture or to the architect is not the same as in engineering, meaning that in engineering it's a form of proportion, right? 1 to 10, 1 to 100. It's a way of handling large scale and putting it on a piece of paper, or understanding, the granularity of the project and the environment. But for the architect, actually, scale has, since the Renaissance, a totally different meaning, in that it puts objects into relation to the human body. So this is how the complementarity between engineering and technicians and architects should work. I mean, we should try to put these two kinds of scales together again. And what you mentioned before, the handwork is very important. And I think that the best exercise is building models. It has shaped my understanding of space so well to get to a point where I could build a model just from touching a material, almost eyes closed, right? Without the need of calculating too much, so that you can really sketch up a project with cardboard, for instance, choosing a material. And this has this haptic component. It's a form of intelligence that I think we should not lose.
Mm. I see it as a sensory embodiment because you're using your senses. You're really feeling that you're modeling the project. And this is what I told my students as well. If you, at some point, you need to live this experience to be able to use the human senses and feel it projected in your
Mhm.
projects, to feel this communication, because humans are in constant unconscious communication with what's around them. So if you don't feel
Absolutely.
this communication, you will not
Mhm.
be able to help people understand this kind of communication. You'll not be able to deliver a message that people must be grounded in their place through this communication and sensory experience, urban
Mhm.
and interior.
Absolutely. Maria, it's a sensory motor process, because we've heard so and so much talking about empathic architecture, and that's slightly wrong. I mean, that's putting us slightly off as architects, right? Because empathy happens between people. But in fact, what you are mentioning is a sensory motor process, which involves a mental rotation, meaning that is motor planning. When I am building a model, I have to engage in that process. I have to do that effort to produce that shape in front of myself, in terms of movements and in terms also of visions of what could be happening in there. So I have always these two sides happening in front of myself, producing the space, projecting this geometry into a material, and then projecting at the same time, projecting myself as a user into that model. And this is very important. A digital tool cannot take that effort. I mean, it's building spatial intelligence with respect to that object in front of yourself that you're creating.
So, what did you see based on your experience? Did you try, for example, to see this embodiment through one sense and then you saw that other senses are engaged, or you tried to see how the whole body can feel architecture around it?
Yes, through the experiments at the laboratory, to jump into the middle of it, right? Of the experiments that I could do for my PhD, and also in the years of my postdoc at the Laboratory of Cognitive Neuroscience, which is at EPFL, with the team of Professor Blanke, was that we used this full body illusion setup, which has this visual tactile component where you dissociate vision from touch. And touch is based on the skin receptors. And the skin is a three-dimensional organ. Meaning that if you manage to dissociate vision is 2D because the retina is flat. So basically the brain is processing it as a two-dimensional information. But then if you bring it together with the tactile information from your skin, which is, as we all know, is this three-dimensional shape, it has this morphology, it becomes spatial. So you get that roomy character. I mean, William James spoke in terms of a spatial or roomy character. So if you ask me what kind of, let's say, emotion architecture evokes in the first place, it's that. It's this feeling of being inside, which in humans evokes, maybe ideas of shelter, familiarity, identity, all of that very basic feelings that you not used to capture consciously. It's just there, but you know.
Yes, so it's very important what you said because, on the one hand, we must understand that the skin has receptors and you're sensitive to what architecture is giving to you from ventilation, from light, colors, materials, and how you receive these colors, how you receive this information. So it's not only a block of stone or wood around you, it's this whole information and what the material is projecting also to you, like from its composition. Also, the consequences of staying at home, for example, during pandemics, or
Mhm.
staying indoors because this is now the nature of our jobs and our lifestyle. It shows us how we're now seeing what's around us through this 2D detached dimension. Whereas we need this 3D dimension you talked about to feel that we are a part of this place. So now
Mhm.
we are in this era of detachment. What do you see the consequences are on us, and what should we do to solve it?
Yes, I think that one of the general misconceptions, if I may call it that way, or of the very general broad assumptions that people have, is that there is a personality sitting in the body, right? And that this personality is finished maybe at the age of 20, right? That you develop it and then you have this character. Which is in the person. And in fact, that's an illusion that your brain is generating to create a certain constancy so that you could identify from day to day with the same body and with the same entity. But if we look at neuroscience and if we look at the studies that have been done at the lab over the past 30 years, I would say starting also with the mirror neurons in the 80s, or you could also go back further back, but it has become very clear in the past 20 or 25 years that it's very organic, that this I feeling is something which is based on the entire body, on the feedback that you have, for instance, through your feet on the ground. So the fact that we're sitting inside the whole day will change that person in that body. That's changing us without us seeing it. And I think that over the years, this has a lasting effect. And when you mention the pandemic or maybe other conditions that are worrisome today, that in our time are difficult, which is maybe changing our behavior, this will have a profound impact that we don't know yet. We have to assume that this cutting down freedom of people will change people massively, starting at a very young age. So the freedom to roam, which is in the constitution, for instance, in some countries in Northern Europe, should be better understood. I think that is a topic which we're not sufficiently aware of.
So, can you explain to us this full body illusion and our responsibilities to create immersive spaces?
Yes. The full body illusion is based on this um, neuronal association, meaning that this goes back to research which has been done in the 80s, I think, and there was this catchphrase, um, fire together, wire together, so that neurons, that are firing together in two distinct areas of the brain,
Mm,
they would wire together, meaning these impressions would associate. So there is a constant activity in the brain. That is how you have to imagine. There are constant um, uh, parallel processes in the brain that can be measured with different tools. And we have also different names for it. So that it is said that the activity is distributed in time and space when looking at the brain.
mm,
Space meaning, the skull, and time that is synchronous, it's associated, it happens together, or then it is asynchronous, it is dissociated. So the brain, or we, are using these both mechanisms to generate experience. And, meaning that silence or dissociation has also a meaning. Because, for instance, from epileptic seizures, that as the brain can't stop, to create activity and, to fire, this could create a bigger problem. This could end as a seizure, as an epileptic seizure. So there are mechanisms to stop brain mechanisms and to prevent neurons from firing. So the dissociation has also a meaning. It has a sense. We have association and dissociation and synchrony and asynchrony in the brain. And the full body illusion builds on that, meaning that similar to the rubber hand illusion, you have this virtual body in front of yourself and you see a visual touch on that body. And at the same time, you will feel a touch on your back. So that is an association with that virtual body in front of yourself. And as this is being presented asynchronously, meaning that the touch on the back of the avatar is displaced from the touch that you feel, you will not associate with the body. So that I'm not sure it's correct to say you simulate or you project sensation. The thing is that you start to feel that that body is your own. I mean, unfortunately, as humans, we always use metaphoric talking, right? We're really constrained by that. And to say that your brain is simulating that other body in front of yourself is metaphorical. And to say that you project sensation is metaphorical, because we don't really know, we can't really know what is happening and what is going on. But the effect is that I am feeling that that body is my body. So I self-identify with that body. Very close to how a prosthetic hand would work,
mm,
which then has the plus of agency, just to say how potent, being able to move and, for instance, to build a model, how much more effectful that could be than just seeing a model. Because what I have mentioned to you, the visual tactile illusion, is just visual and tactile. It doesn't include yet any motor properties. So the eyes, you wouldn't have the right, to roll your eyes or to move your head, which is relevant for embodiment.
mm. So, in my interpretation of what you're saying, I can say that We need alignment and meaning in the context we're in to have this sense of presence, to have this harmony in both conscious and unconscious dimensions. And I understand also that time and space are language per se, and the nonverbal is also a language. And we need all this frame with these components to have a narrative. And when we have a narrative of the place, we can engage in it. We can feel that we're in it. Um, in terms of sensory experience and our mental construct of it. So we need an
Yes.
alignment between the bodily experience and the construct of what we're experiencing at a sensory level. Because also you
Yes.
mentioned
That is.
the organ, and even people when they use an artificial organ and then remove it for some reason, they have this ghost experience. They say
Mhm.
the organ ghost experience. So they feel that it's here. The body is saying it's here, and they're not using it, even if they have an accident and they have to remove a body part.
Yes, the phantom limb. Yes.
The
Mhm.
phantom limb.
Um, that is very well said, Maria. And I think that narrative should also come back on that very sensory level, haptic level of architecture, so that the architect becomes a narrator um, of the space also through affordance, because affordance is changing our perception of space a lot. I mean, whether there is a chair in a room or not, that is changing the space completely. And I think that's where we can really, you know, invite architects to join this kind of research and this kind of studies.
And this reveals also how important it is when we are doing a space, especially at the urban level, to have a narrative of the space because narrative creates identity. Without a narrative, all types of identities, by the way, the social, the personal, the national, without a narrative, we're lost. We lose the sense of time, even. We lose the track of events. We don't know our past to understand the future. We don't know where we stand. We don't know how to judge what's happening, even in architecture. Is it good for us? Is it bad for us?
Hmm. Um, the thing is that here a lot of research would be required because this is knowledge that comes from architecture. I think that is where, as architects, we are very well educated. And basically, neuroscientists would be very interested in that, but they know little about it because the environmental impact is very little studied because we're still trying to figure out the brain and the body, let's say,
Mm.
in itself, how it interacts. But I wonder sometimes if it's possible. I mean, this may be a question also for including psychologists. If it's possible to study really this bodily interaction without considering the environment. It's really multiparametric.
Mm.
And if you mention history, that is absolutely true. That is also the contribution by social sciences to architecture, right? In making us aware of the fact that we need a certain past and we need to be embedded in a certain history and a certain identity, that it matters. And if we lose that identity, apparently we become very manipulable. It is very dangerous for human society to be in that void.
And this is the importance of having the multidisciplinary interaction communication to reach the outcomes necessary to design a place from a city to the smallest room, even. If you want to design, for example, a room for you to a bedroom, you need something that aligns with what you are. Maybe you are sensory overloaded, like easily. You have ADHD, you have depressions, and here also we will have different disciplines and many fields in this subfields, let's say, in the same field. And you're saying also that we have numbers. So in neuroscience and lab work, we have the quantified results. And then we have also psychologists and we have social sciences. We have qualitative, mostly qualitative results. So,
Yes.
do you work on combining these two in your work? Have you done what tools do you use also in the quantitative approach? And have you used it in a field or only in the lab?
I mean, one thing which has become very interesting recently to me is to work with ethnographers. And I have read for now into ethnography because there are methods. There is a very accurate methodology to record space, let's say spatial features. And in particular, I mean sensory ethnography, where you would go and really characterize, the tactile and the haptic features of a space to understand the environment of the user. And yes, I want to work on a project concerning healthy aging.
Hmm.
Um, and maybe here this could be a good moment to add a point that I wanted to say already before, in terms of the change in our profession. Because one of the fundamental changes that you need to handle right now in architecture is participation. And I think that the architectural discipline is poorly equipped for that because we have been used over hundreds, maybe even thousands of years that the architect is like the chief artist and is handling the construction site in a very top-down manner. And maybe 100 years ago, that was still very useful, but today it is very destructive. It's of no use anymore. And it would be also in terms, of this climatic change that we need to address and social change in big parts that we need to address and inclusion, building more inclusive spaces. We really need to push participatory processes. So the architect needs to become that person that I've mentioned between the human factor and technology. We need to understand how to handle this collaboration. And that can only happen through participatory processes, and including neuroscience would be one of these, because I really get the tools to customize, certain environments and to make it also target conflict proof, so that I can include the staff and I can include the patients. So that would be inclusive. And on the other hand, I think that the work is also changing, the task is changing, so that so far we've been asked, I remember very well as a freelance architect being asked, well, how will the city look in 50 years? How will this neighborhood look in 30 years, or architecture in 20 years? Or somebody asked me to draw a vision for Switzerland in 300 years. I mean, that is science fiction, right? Um, which is also very interesting because it allows to go into more utopian mode of thinking. But in fact, the question is, my answer today is, well, how would you like it to be? How do we want to live together? I have stopped producing images because people have gotten so used to
Mm,
consume, and
mm.
now another image and another image. So that's not useful anymore.
It's just
It has
dopamine.
lost its
It's
impact.
just dopamine and adrenaline and the sense of
Ex-
awe at the moment, instant, gratification, as Palasma says,
Exactly.
and then it's
Exactly.
gone. Not only gone, it's tiring after a while.
Yeah, it is. It is. And we don't get smarter from that. So we should start to think. I mean, I'm 50 now, and I should start to wonder, how do I want to live when I'm 70, right? Or when I'm
Mm,
80? Because we know the demographics, we know the climate, we know the trends, we know the mega trends. So how do I prepare myself, and do I have the means to prepare the society to move in that direction?
mm-mm. So you're talking also about this number of renders. You said we said it's tiring, but it's not only tiring, it's just also added information on our brain that we don't need. We need our energy for other kind of information, for other kinds of
Hmm.
activities. Also, you mentioned the role we talk about as architects. So since my first year at the architecture school, I hear l'architecte est le chef d'orchestre. The architect is the maestro. The architect is. So for people who want to use it, there are two types of people: people who want to use it as a status, but also people who hear from this the amount of responsibility an architect has. So, this responsibility comes with all this information we're talking about. And alone, it's quite complex to have the full knowledge in all these disciplines. Maybe you will have some knowledge. And this is why collaboration is always welcome. And this is why we need to know the team. We need to build, to have around us, to have the outcome that we are visualizing for the future. And we need to be, we need to study from university, from this soft, where we are still soft. We need to study uh, how to have this vision, where we need to arrive, where the final destination to our project. So it's not only about a beautiful instant project. We need to see the outcome on the society, on okay, not each person. We cannot study each person in the society, but the general outcome. Where are we heading with it? In all these point of views of these other disciplines.
Yes, I believe that is such a big challenge and a big issue today, what you mentioned, because we have chosen, to change our history, our narrative as a society. There has been so much disruption because until maybe 50 years ago, it was obvious how you would do it. I remember even in the 90s, some professors telling us, well, if you draw a 90-degree angle, we simply know how to do it. As an architect, there's even no need, to draw details. It's kind of obvious. And I think that we have lost that factor by now. And we just don't know. We have to find out. You have to create tools to find out what's the best, right?
So here lies the creativity of the architect. Now,
Yes.
in
Yes.
this component, let's say one of the factors. What's one message, mindset, or piece of advice you'd love to leave with the audience?
I was thinking about this before. I mean, I would recommend to be an empathic architect. I think that is the solution, and not building empathic architecture. That is not, or smart buildings. It would be cool if architects could be smart and empathic,
Mm,
and in that understand that they are humans like everybody else, so that you might ask yourself the question, how would I want to live in this environment I'm designing? And sometimes also shed that, business perspective, that it's just for a commercial purpose and that it's just temporary for people, but to really get to the understanding that I think in 2022, that was the first year where human-made objects were greater. The number of human-made objects was greater than the mass of natural objects, so that we try to understand the impact that architecture has on the environment in positive terms, that we start to become creative again and to see the human as part of nature and nature as part of humans instead of looking at it in a separate way.
Dr. Isabella, thank you so much for this interesting
Thank you,
conversation.
Julia.
And thanks for watching us.